Snow falls. It doesn't drift. It cuts. Sharp flakes blown sideways by a wind that hasn't stopped for 3 days. The forest around Bastogne is a skeleton, black branches clawing at a white sky. Smoke rises from somewhere beyond the trees, not from chimneys, from burning vehicles. A soldier crouches in a foxhole. His hands are grey, not from cold, though the cold is eating through his gloves, but from the ash and dirt ground into his skin. He hasn't slept in 40 hours. His rifle barrel rests on the frozen edge of the hole, pointed at nothing. At everything. The forest is silent, then it isn't. A low rumble. Distant, growing. The kind of sound that vibrates in your chest before your ears register it. He knows that sound, everyone here knows it. Tanks. He doesn't move, doesn't call out, just stares into the white and grey blur ahead, waiting for shapes to emerge from the fog. His breath comes in short bursts, steam rising, disappearing. Behind him, deeper in the town, a radio crackles, static. A voice breaks through, faint and distorted. They're asking us to surrender. No one answers. The rumble grows louder. Closer now, metal treads grinding frozen earth. The soldier tightens his grip on the rifle. His fingers are numb. He can barely feel the trigger anymore. Somewhere to his left, another foxhole, another soldier, waiting. Beyond that, another, and another. A thin line of frozen men stretched around a dying town, holding on because there's nothing else left to do. The shapes appear, dark, massive, moving through the white curtain of snow like ghosts made of steel. December 16th, 1944, the Ardennes Forest, Belgium, a place no one thought mattered anymore. The war was supposed to be over by Christmas. Everyone said so. The Germans were broken, retreating, done. Then the forest exploded. It started before dawn. Artillery shells tearing through the fog, thousands of them. The sound was unnatural, like the earth itself was being ripped apart. American positions along the front line disintegrated in minutes. Foxholes collapsed. Trees burst into splinters. Men vanished. Behind the barrage came the Panzers. Tiger tanks. Panthers. King tigers. Massive steel beasts rumbling out of the mist like prehistoric nightmares. Their engines roared. Their treads crushed frozen ground. Behind them, columns of German infantry poured forward, grey uniforms blending into the snow and smoke. This was Operation Wacht am Rhein, Hitler's last gamble. A desperate all-or-nothing offensive designed to split the Allied lines, capture the port of Antwerp, and turn the tide of the war. 3 German armies, 200,000 men, hundreds of tanks, all concentrated on a single, thinly defended stretch of forest. The Americans never saw it coming. Within hours, entire regiments were shattered. Communication lines went dead. Roads became clogged with retreating vehicles. Panic spread faster than the German advance. Some units fought, some ran, most just tried to survive. Staff Sergeant Miller crouched behind a stone wall as the world came apart around him. He'd been eating breakfast when the shelling started. Now his foxhole was gone. Half his squad was gone. The tree line ahead erupted with muzzle flashes. He ran, not away from the fight, toward the rear, toward anyone who could tell him what was happening. The road was chaos. Jeeps racing past, trucks overloaded with wounded, officers shouting contradictory orders. Nobody knew anything, except that the Germans were everywhere. By December 18th, the front had collapsed along a 50-mile stretch. German spearheads drove deep into Allied territory, creating a massive bulge in the line. American divisions scattered. Entire battalions lost contact with command. The situation was disintegrating. But one place became the hinge on which everything turned. Bastogne, a small Belgian town. Population 4,000. 7 roads converged there like the spokes of a wheel. Whoever controlled Bastogne controlled the crossroads, controlled movement, controlled the entire offensive. The Germans knew it. So did the Americans. On December 18th, elements of the 101st Airborne Division were rushed into Bastogne. Paratroopers, mostly veterans of D-Day and Market Garden. Tough, experienced, but exhausted. They'd been pulled out of the line to rest, given 2 weeks to recover from months of continuous combat. Now they were going back in. They arrived by truck convoy. No heavy weapons, no winter gear, just rifles, grenades, and whatever ammunition they could carry. The town was already filling with retreating soldiers, engineers, artillery crews, stragglers from shattered units, everyone converging on the last defensible position before the Germans cut them off completely. Lieutenant Hansen stepped off the truck and into madness. The streets were packed, vehicles abandoned, wounded lying on doorsteps. Civilians huddled in cellars, nobody in charge. His company commander found him an hour later. "Dig in on the eastern perimeter. We hold until relieved." "How long?" "As long as it takes." By December 20th, Bastogne was surrounded. The trap had closed. The encirclement tightened like a noose. German forces pushed past Bastogne on all sides, ignoring it at first, focused on the larger objective of reaching the Meuse River. But the town didn't fall. It held. And that became a problem. Inside the perimeter, approximately 15,000 American troops dug in. Paratroopers, tank destroyers, artillery crews, medics, cooks, anyone who could hold a weapon. They formed a defensive ring around the town, a rough circle roughly 4 miles across. Outside that circle, 4 German divisions, the 2nd Panzer Division, the Panzer Lehr, Volksgrenadier units, tanks, artillery, infantry, cutting off roads, blocking supply lines, waiting. The weather turned, heavy fog rolled in, snow fell constantly, temperatures dropped below freezing and stayed there. Visibility dropped to nothing. The sky disappeared behind a grey curtain so thick it felt like the world had been erased above the tree line. And that meant no air support, no resupply, no reinforcements. The defenders were on their own. Ammunition ran low, food disappeared, medical supplies dwindled. There was no electricity, no running water. Men slept in basements, barns, foxholes scraped into frozen dirt. They burned furniture to stay warm, wrapped themselves in curtains and tablecloths because they didn't have winter uniforms. Private Coleman hadn't eaten in 36 hours. His last meal was half a can of cold beans shared between 4 men. Now his stomach cramped constantly. His hands shook, not from fear, from hunger. He shared a foxhole with Jenkins. They took turns sleeping. 2 hours on, 2 hours off. When Coleman closed his eyes, he dreamed of food, hot soup, bread, anything. When he opened them, the forest was still there, still grey, still waiting. Frostbite became as dangerous as enemy fire. Medic stations overflowed. Captain Winters ran one in a stone barn on the southern edge of the town. Wounded arrived constantly. Shrapnel wounds, gunshots, frozen feet black with tissue death. He worked by candlelight with whatever tools he could find. Kitchen knives sterilised in boiling water, bedsheets torn into bandages. Morphine ran out on December 21st. After that, men screamed. The surgeries continued anyway. Amputations performed on a wooden table. No anaesthetic. Just leather belts clenched between teeth and strong hands holding down shoulders. Winters didn't sleep. Couldn't. The wounded kept coming, but the line held. The Germans attacked from the north, from the east, from the south, probing, testing. Each assault came with tanks and infantry pushing towards the perimeter. American crews with anti-tank guns waited until the last possible second, until they could see the rivets on the Panzer holes, then opened fire. Some attacks were stopped cold, others broke through. December 21st, dawn. 3 Panther tanks smashed through the eastern perimeter near the village of Foy. American positions disintegrated. Machine gun nests vanished under tank treads. Infantry poured through the gap. Lieutenant Hansen grabbed his remaining men, 12 soldiers. That's all he had left of a company that started with over 100. Fall back to the tree line. Reform there. They ran through snow up to their knees. Behind them, German voices shouted. Engines roared. Hansen reached the trees, turned, raised his rifle. The lead Panther rolled into view, 50 metres away. Its turret swiveled. A bazooka team appeared from nowhere. 2 men, one carrying the launcher, the other the rocket. They crept to within 30 metres, aimed, fired. The rocket streaked across the snow, hit the Panther's flank, exploded. The tank stopped. Smoke poured from its engine compartment. The crew bailed out. American rifles cut them down before they reached cover. The other 2 Panthers retreated. The gap closed. Hansen slumped against a tree. His hands were shaking. Not from cold this time. At night, the forest came alive with sound. Engine noise, metal clanking, German voices shouting commands. The Americans listened, waited. Knew another attack was coming, but not when, not where. Sleep became impossible. Private Coleman lay in his foxhole, staring at the black sky. Next to him, Jenkins whispered prayers. Coleman didn't pray, didn't see the point. Either they'd live or they wouldn't. God had left this place days ago. Then, on December 22nd, something changed. A German officer approached the American lines under a white flag. He came at noon. 2 German soldiers. One carried the white flag. The other carried a message. They walked slowly through the snow, hands visible, toward the American positions near the southern edge of the perimeter. American soldiers watched them approach, rifles raised, fingers on triggers, waiting for a trick. Sergeant Harper stood in his foxhole, aiming at the lead German. 30 meters, 20, 10. Close enough to see his face now. Young, maybe 20 years old, scared. The Germans stopped 20 meters out. An American officer emerged from the tree line. Captain, wary. He met them halfway. The German officer handed him a folded paper, typed. Formal, in English. It was an ultimatum. The message was clear: surrender Bastogne or face total annihilation. The Germans claimed overwhelming superiority, promised honourable treatment if the Americans laid down their arms, warned that continued resistance would result in the complete destruction of the town and everyone in it. The officer read it, folded it, looked at the Germans. Wait here. He turned and walked back toward command. The message made its way through the chain, from captain to major to colonel, finally reached Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st Airborne. He was in the command post, a Belgian barracks converted into headquarters. Maps covered the walls, radio operators huddled around equipment trying to maintain contact with scattered units. McAuliffe read the ultimatum, looked at his staff. Someone asked what he wanted to say in response. McAuliffe's reply was one word: nuts. His staff laughed, told him he couldn't send that, too informal, the Germans wouldn't understand. McAuliffe didn't care. He wrote it down himself, one word, typed on a piece of paper: nuts. Colonel Harper delivered the message personally, walked back to where the German officers waited in the snow, handed it over. They read it, looked confused. What does this mean? Harper smiled, not warmly. It means go to hell. The German officer's face hardened. He folded the paper, turned without another word. Both Germans walked back towards their lines. Harper watched them disappear into the fog. When word spread through the American positions, something shifted. Men who'd been silent for days started talking again, sharing cigarettes, making jokes, dark jokes, soldier jokes, but jokes nonetheless. They were surrounded, outnumbered, freezing, starving, but they weren't beaten. Not yet. The Germans didn't find it funny. That night, the shelling intensified. Artillery pounded the town for 3 straight hours. Buildings collapsed. Civilians died in their cellars. American positions took direct hits. Foxholes caved in. Men were buried alive in frozen earth. The message was clear. No more talking. December 23rd. The fog lifted. For the first time in days, the sky opened. Clear, blue, painfully bright against the endless white of the snow. Soldiers looked up and saw something they'd almost forgotten existed. Sunlight. Private Coleman stood in his foxhole, squinting at the sky. He'd forgotten what blue looked like, forgotten the sun was up there somewhere. And then he saw something else. Planes, hundreds of them, C-47 transport aircraft roaring overhead in massive formations. Their engines filled the air with a sound that drowned out everything else. They came low, barely clearing the treetops, and from their bellies dropped parachutes, red, white, green, hundreds of them blossoming against the sky like flowers in a frozen wasteland. Supply drops, ammunition, medical supplies, food, blankets, gasoline, artillery shells, everything the defenders needed to survive. Coleman climbed out of his foxhole, started running toward the nearest drop. All around him soldiers poured from their positions, racing through the snow, grabbing crates, dragging parachutes. He reached a container half buried in a drift, pried it open. Inside, Gist, K-rations, chocolate bars, cigarettes. He grabbed a ration pack, tore it open with his teeth, ate without tasting, didn't care. It was food. The supplies hit the ground inside the perimeter. Soldiers worked like ants, hauling everything back to the lines. Some drops missed, landed outside the defensive ring. German soldiers scrambled to recover them. Firefights erupted over scattered supply crates in open fields, but most made it through. Captain Winters received medical supplies that afternoon: morphine, sulfur powder, bandages, real bandages. He stood in the barn, staring at the crates like they were gold. For the first time in days, he could actually help the wounded instead of just watching them die. The resupply changed everything. Guns that had gone silent roared back to life. Artillery batteries that had been rationing shells opened up with full barrages. Tank destroyer crews that had been down to single digits of ammunition reloaded and repositioned. They could fight again, and the Germans knew it. The attacks intensified, desperate now, brutal. The Wehrmacht threw everything at Bastogne: tanks, infantry, artillery. They needed to take the town before reinforcements arrived, before the Americans could break out. December 24th, Christmas Eve, German forces launched coordinated assaults from 3 directions simultaneously. The northern perimeter buckled, the western sector nearly collapsed, fighting devolved into close-quarters savagery. Bayonets, grenades, rifle butts, men killed each other in frozen fields with whatever they had. Lieutenant Hansen's position took a direct assault. 6 Panthers supported by 2 companies of infantry. His anti-tank guns knocked out 3 tanks. The others kept coming. 1 Panther broke through, rolled straight into the American lines. Its machine guns swept the foxholes. Men died before they could run. A bazooka team emerged from a ruined building, fired at point-blank range. The rocket punched through the Panther's rear armour. The tank exploded from the inside. Its turret lifted off, spinning through the air before crashing into the snow 30 metres away. The surviving German infantry retreated. Hansen counted his losses: 8 dead, 14 wounded. The line held, barely, but the line didn't break. December 26th. 30 miles south of Bastogne, Lieutenant General George S. Patton's Third Army smashed through the German lines. It was one of the most aggressive manoeuvres of the war. Patton had wheeled his entire army 90 degrees north in the middle of the winter and launched a full-scale assault to relieve the encircled town. His tanks punched through German positions like a sledgehammer. The 4th Armoured Division led the attack. Sherman tanks and half-tracks fighting through snow and mud and German resistance. Villages taken, roadblocks destroyed, enemy units shattered. At 4:45 p.m, lead elements reached Bastogne. Lieutenant Charles Boges, commanding a platoon of Sherman tanks, rolled into the southern perimeter. American soldiers emerged from foxholes, stared at the tanks like they were hallucinations. Boges climbed out of his turret. "We're here." The siege was over. Snow kept falling. The dead lay where they fell, frozen, half buried. German and American bodies scattered across the fields and forests around Bastogne. Some would stay there until spring, some longer. Graves registration teams moved through the battlefield, identifying, recording, collecting dog tags. The work was slow. Bodies frozen solid didn't cooperate. Sometimes they had to use axes. The town itself was shattered. Buildings collapsed. Streets cratered. Walls pockmarked with bullet holes. Civilians emerged from cellars where they had hidden for days, blinking in the light, staring at the wreckage of their homes. But the road network was intact. And the Germans didn't get it. Private Coleman survived. So did Jenkins. They stayed in their foxhole until the tanks arrived. Then they climbed out, walked back toward town. Neither spoke. What was there to say? Captain Winters continued working in the barn. Even after relief arrived, the wounded kept coming. Other sectors of the Bulge were still fighting. He worked through Christmas, through New Year's, didn't stop until mid-January when the battle finally ended. Lieutenant Hansen received a promotion. He didn't want it, took it anyway, command of what remained of his company. 37 men out of 140, he wrote letters to the families, all of them, every soldier who didn't make it out. The words never felt adequate. The siege of Bastogne became a symbol, not because it was the biggest battle of the Bulge, it wasn't, not because it had the most casualties, other engagements were bloodier, but because it was the moment the German offensive stalled. Hitler's gamble failed here. The delay at Bastogne gave the Allies time to regroup, time to move reserves into position, time to counterattack. By holding those 7 roads, the defenders changed the course of the entire battle. The German offensive collapsed in January. The Wehrmacht retreated, burned equipment, abandoned positions, fell back across the same ground they'd taken in December. The war in the West resumed its inevitable march toward Germany. But the cost was staggering. American casualties during the Battle of the Bulge exceeded 80,000, 19,000 killed. German casualties were even higher, over 100,000. Entire divisions were bled dry, equipment lost, men killed or captured. And for what? A last desperate attempt to change an outcome already written, to buy time that couldn't be bought, to win a war that was already lost. Bastogne didn't win the war, but it proved something else. That surrounded men could stand. That cold and hunger and fear couldn't break the will to fight. That mockery and ultimatums meant nothing when the line had to hold. The Germans mocked the Americans trapped in Bastogne, demanded surrender, promised annihilation, until they didn't. Until they were the ones retreating. There's a photograph, black and white, taken in Bastogne after the siege ended. It shows a frozen foxhole, empty, snow piled inside, a rifle leaning against the edge, abandoned or forgotten. Behind it, the forest stretches into grey nothing. You can almost hear the silence. The kind that only exists after something terrible has ended. Not peace, just the absence of sound. The world holding its breath before it exhales and moves on. Bastogne sits quiet now, a small town in Belgium. Roads still converge there. People live there, work there. Children play in streets where men once died. The war is a memory preserved in museums and monuments and ceremonies held every December. But the ground remembers. Underneath the snow and soil the scars remain. Shell fragments, spent casings, bones sometimes, turned up by farmers' ploughs decades later. Identification tags corroded beyond recognition. The forest remembers too. Trees that grew after the war stand where men once froze to death in foxholes. Birds nest in branches above ground where tanks burned. Moss covers craters that were once killing zones. Nature reclaims everything eventually. History doesn't disappear, it sinks. Becomes part of the landscape, part of the earth itself. Layers of time burying the past beneath the present. And sometimes, when winter comes and snow falls again, it's easy to imagine standing at the edge of that frozen forest, looking out into the fog, listening for the rumble of engines that will never come. The defenders of Bastogne didn't know they were making history. They just knew they had to hold. So they did. One frozen day at a time, one attack repulsed, one night survived, until relief came, until the siege broke, until they could finally stop. Some went home, some didn't. All of them carried Bastogne with them for the rest of their lives, in dreams, in silence, in the way they looked at winter. The town stands, the roads remain, the forest grows, and somewhere beneath the snow, the memory waits, patient, permanent, part of the earth now, forever.